Good afternoon. Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome to Whiskey Makes Me Happy Hour. This is the 4th episode coming to you live from Johannesburg. And I'm Mark from Whiskey Brother. And once again, unfortunately for you, I will be your host for the next hour and a bit. Thank you very much for watching and tuning in. Wherever you're watching from, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you, your friends, your family are keeping safe, healthy, and sane during these challenging times. If you are a South African watching in, and there's a good chance you are, you will have seen kind of the recent news from our president last night about the South African lockdown slowly easing off. Just from a business perspective, at the moment, as you know, Whiskey Brother is unfortunately closed across the board. Our bar is closed, our physical shop is closed, and although you can purchase online, we can't fulfill, we can't get your whiskey to you. It's been a bit of a difficult 5 weeks. It's been 4 weeks now. 1 week left to go. Unfortunately, like many businesses, we're taking a bit of a hurting, and we're just trying to do our best to get through this. And thankfully, we have these events to commiserate with fellow whiskey lovers and share a dram to ease our pain. With the reduction in the restrictions, we are not exactly sure what that means for us yet. We know that the bar will still be closed for a while. I think that's the reality of the situation. We understand why. In terms of retail, we've seen conflicting information, so we are waiting on official guidance from the government just around whether alcohol retail will resume next Friday or not, whether that's in a restricted capacity or not at all. As soon as we know what we can do, we will communicate that to everyone. So just watch the space for our newsletter, our website, etc. In the meantime, as I said, you can buy online, and it's a great help to us as a business, as a small business that is still holding all its staff contingency to process an online order. We just can't deliver until after the lockdown and legally able to do so. So just watch the space, and we'll let you know as soon as we know. But I hope you're safe, hope you're sound, hope you still have some whiskey left in your glass. Just quick housekeeping. So technically, if there's any issues, please just come back to this link. If I suddenly disappear or I have any issues, I'll do the same. So just sit tight for a few minutes. We do have a poll going. We've got 2 polls going, actually. We really enjoyed doing these live streams. And I mentioned before, we've wanted to do video content. This has been a great push in order to, get our asses in gear and actually adopt some kind of video, channel. So we plan on keeping these up. We think they've been very well received. We've had great feedback. We've had great viewership. We love it. We really appreciate it. Find it's a nice way to share kind of whiskey information and knowledge, and have special guests, on screen that in South Africa we don't often see. So it's a really good way to, I think, to some degree, get the South African whiskey community closer to the international one. So if you'd like to see this continue, there is a question just to say yes or no. We want to know that there is interest out there. We most likely won't do it on a weekly basis. Maybe look at every 2 or 3 weeks. Still get special guests in. Maybe look at special episodes with particular whiskey topics. But let us know if you'd like us to continue, and also let us know what time would suit you better. I think for lockdown, a Friday afternoon at 4 is a very convenient time. But let's imagine a scenario where everyone's back at work. What time would be best to have these videos? If you've happened to have missed any of the episodes, they're on our YouTube channel. I did post the link in the chat. We started that just as an archive to keep all the videos there. If we do any other video content, we'll put it up on YouTube. So just subscribe if you're interested in getting updates. And then lastly, if you do have any questions while we're live today, just post the questions. I already see 2 questions in the Ask a Question section, so thank you. Any general whiskey questions, any questions for our special guest today, Dr. Rachel Barrie, about any of her whiskies or the distilleries? If it's addressed to Rachel, I will be sure to ask her near the end of my conversation with her. And if it's whiskey in general, then something I'll address near the end. So thank you very much for watching. I feel almost slightly less prepared than usual, and I hope the appearance is we just throw this together and it works great. And that's not the truth. I am incredibly nervous before every session. It usually takes my first dram and a good kind of 10 minutes of talking for the nerves to settle. But if you're looking at the chat, there's a lot of birthday messages. So I I'm almost embarrassed to say today is my birthday. And thank you so much. Lots of birthday wishes. I really appreciate it. What a nice way to spend an hour on my birthday sharing a dram with, first of all, an industry icon, as well as everyone watching in and sharing a dram with me. So let us know what you're drinking. Just drop a comment in the chat. Let us know what everyone has in their glass. I saw a lot of BenRiach and Glenglassaugh, which is great. Well chosen. I myself am drinking the Whiskey Brother BenRiach rum cask that we just had bottled a little while ago. Rachel's signature is on the bottle, so I'm going to take that as this was the best cask that she could find us, and maybe we'll ask her about that. But that's what's in my glass. So just before we continue, then I think before we invite Rachel up on stage, I'm very keen to give a little bit of background, about Rachel and about the distilleries that she works for. There's so much to cover, and I think that's the one thing I struggle with during these episodes is that there's just so much information. We could spend several hours just talking about one distillery, and now in a matter of 45 minutes, we need to kind of compress everything down. But I am keen just to give a little bit of information about Rachel and the distilleries. So Dr. Rachel Barrie is the master blender for BenRiach Distilling Company. BenRiach Distilling Company, actually interesting history there because it was formed by 3 individuals, 2 of whom are South African, and that was back in 2004. That company entails or comprises of 3 distilleries: BenRiach, GlenDronach, and Glenglassaugh. BenRiach being a Speyside distillery, right near Elgin. If you know your map of Scotland, northeast, you've got Speyside sitting nicely there, and BenRiach is on the west side of that. Then you have GlenDronach, which is east of Speyside, and Glenglassaugh, which is northeast of Speyside. So 3 distilleries. 2 of them are Highland distilleries, but they're very close to Speyside, which I think actually makes for interesting discussion in itself. So all 3 distilleries not too far away from each other, and all producing quite unique styles of spirit, and we'll very much speak to Rachel about that. BenRiach started in 1897, was when it was initially built. Quite a checkered history, and again, it's quite common in the Scotch single malt landscape. But built in 1897. At the time, it was almost dubbed the Longmorn 2. If you're on the BenRiach property, you can see Longmorn Distillery. Literally, I think it's about 500 meters. It's across a field of barley. Back in the day, there was actually a private steam locomotive between the 2 distilleries that transported coal and barley in barrels. They were owned by the same individuals. Sadly, though, big whiskey downturn around that time in history, and in 1900, just 3 years after opening, BenRiach closed. It then remained closed for, I think, the longest period on record to then still open up. So the distillery closed in 1900 and reopened in 1965. So that's a 65-year period of not operating, which to think that then after 1965 it could still, in some sense, be refurbished and start producing whiskey again is incredible. During that period of closure, it wasn't making whiskey, but the maltings were still in use and very much used for Longmorn. So they're still malting barley on site, and I'm quite keen to speak to Rachel about the ability to malt and peat barley on site. It was then in 2004 bought by a company called Intra Trading, which was 2 South Africans, Jeff Bell and Wayne Kieswetter, and a third individual, Billy Walker. I think everyone is probably quite familiar with Billy Walker, the name. Billy Walker, also a legend in the industry, and I think very much helped with BenRiach Distilling Company to put these single malts back on the map. A few years later, they bought GlenDronach, so not too far away. GlenDronach built in 1826. Also quite a checkered history to some degree. Again, it's quite common, but not for as an extended period. It operated fairly well throughout the 1900s. In 1996 was closed, reopened in 2002, and that impacts your GlenDronach 15. So people, I know a lot of people are like, why is GlenDronach 15 suddenly off the market and going to be changed? Well, it's because there was a period where the distillery wasn't making whiskey. It very much coincided then with the 15 being available, 15, 20 years later. And then the third distillery is Glenglassaugh. Glenglassaugh, a Highlands distillery. It literally is 100 meters off the coast. So I think it's Sand End Bay, absolutely picturesque and beautiful. From the still room, there is a big glass wall, glass window, and you can see through onto the bay. Absolutely gorgeous. Probably one of the most picturesque distilleries I've visited. Built in 1875. And again, very checkered history here. Closed from 1908 to 1931. Closed from 1936 to 1960. Closed from 1986 to 2008. And so Glenglassaugh has been offline more than it's been online. To some degree, so has BenRiach, that's the truth. In 2013, the intra-trading company, which is BenRiach Distilling Co., bought it. And then several years ago, in 2016, Brown-Forman, the American company, bought BenRiach Distilling Company. So it changed hands. It is Billy Walker is no longer involved. The South Africans are no longer involved. And in 2016 as well, I think it was the same year, Dr. Rachel Barrie joined the group. So for Dr. Rachel Barrie, and I'm going to refer to her respectfully as Rachel, Rachel is responsible for, I quote, the developing, testing, and expertly fine-tuning each distillery's unique signature character and range of expressions. That sounds like quite a feat, and we're going to definitely try and understand how the hell she gets it all done. Very honored to have her on board. In just a few minutes, we'll call her up. By my count, approximately 29 years in the industry. So, that's touching 3 decades. If you just think about how much the industry has changed in 5 years, just think about what Rachel has seen in 30 working for the Scotch whisky industry. She's often referred to as the First Lady of Scotch, which I think is a wonderful moniker, and very much on record as having tasted over approximately 150,000 casks. Doing a bit of reading, that number comes, first I think comes to kind of online print, so to speak, probably 3 or 4 years ago. I'd like to think she's probably tasted a hell of a lot more casks since then. So I'm just going to say, tasted well over 170,000 casks. I mean, if you just think about that, that is absolutely phenomenal. Rachel has an honours degree in chemistry from the University of Edinburgh. She used to work for the Scotch. She started in the industry at the Scotch Whisky Research Institute, which is almost an industry body based in Scotland that does research into Scotch whisky. I really would like to, ask Rachel a question or two around SWRI. Her first distillery job was in 1995 with Glenmorangie. A few years later, Glenmorangie bought Ardbeg, and you may recall that from our conversation last week with Brendan McCarran. So Rachel then working on Glenmorangie and Ardbeg as well as Glenmorangie. At that point in time, Glenmorangie PLC also owned the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. Remember that name. SMWS. SMWS are an independent bottler. They have released well over, I think they're now in about 145 different distilleries over their 30-year history. And Rachel at the time was in charge of managing stocks, which again, if you just think about the range of different whiskies that Rachel would have been exposed to and responsible for is incredible. In 2011, she moved across to Morris and Bowmore distillers, which is Bowmore, Auchentoshan, Glengarry, and then later on Laphroaig and Ardmore. So a very impressive resume of distilleries. In 2017, joined the BenRiach Distillery Company, which is owned by Brown-Forman, and then started working on BenRiach, GlenDronach, and Glenglassaugh. Just then lastly, in 2018, she was awarded an honorary doctorate of science by the University of Edinburgh for her services to the whisky industry and for her understanding of the alchemy of whisky. In 2019, inducted into the Whisky Magazine's illustrious Hall of Fame. In 2019 as well, inducted as the keeper of the Quaich. And in 2020, which was now literally a month ago, I mean, it is 2020, but in terms of the awards, she received the highly commended Icons of Whisky for the Scottish Master Blender. The individual who won it is actually Billy Walker, so I think there's a bit of irony there. I look forward to the time when Rachel wins it and Billy comes second, which I have no doubt is just a year or two away. With that in mind, I am going to just include Rachel into the feed. Rachel, if you're standing by. I have invited her. So Rachel and I have done a test or two. It worked quite seamlessly. She is bunkered down in Scotland with her family, so I know she's trying to find a quiet room. She has 3 sons and her husband on the property, so we tried to test it out in the garden. It looked like a beautiful Scottish day, but unfortunately it was a bit noisy, so I know she's found her way inside. I'm just going to invite her. Just give her a minute. If you have any questions for Rachel, and I see a lot of questions popping up, just ask. That's great. I see upvoting as well, just meaning that if you like the question, you give it a vote. Rachel, you found your way back outside.
I have, yes. I've been moving around because my house is far too noisy. I live with 3 sons and a husband, and they're all trying to work at the moment, and they're also speaking. And then I've also got the birds tweeting outside. So hopefully this will be fine. Hopefully you can hear me.
Well, I can hear you fine and I can see you fine. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. It's such an honor to have you on the show. Are you sure you're in Scotland? Because that weather looks way too nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot warmer than it looks a lot warmer than it actually is. It's probably about 15 degrees Celsius here because, you know, I get a little bit of the sea air here as well. But the skies are blue. There's birds in the trees. The flowers are out. You know, I'm making best use of this time in the garden since we're all under lockdown at the moment.
Yeah. So, first of all, how are you and your family kind of coping or surviving the lockdown? Are you all well?
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you very much for asking. We are all together. My youngest is videoing homeschooling, and my oldest is finishing his degree. And yeah, we're all kind of in separate rooms. That's probably the best way. So it's nice to be around, but it's nice to escape into the garden too.
Excellent. Whereabouts in Scotland are you located?
Oh, at the moment I'm in my home in Edinburgh. Okay. My family home is up in Aberdeenshire, but my children are in school in Edinburgh, and it's very close to our bottling hall. So I'm only sort of 5-10 minutes away from that.
Okay. Excellent.
And that's obviously where we bottle all our malts.
Right, excellent. So, I mean, I hope I did you justice in giving some kind of introduction. If you could maybe just take us through kind of, your high level role, what you're responsible for doing for the various distilleries.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. Yes. Well, obviously I started with Brown-Forman 3 years ago now, was given the great opportunity to be master blender for the 3 malts. And the main responsibilities include really understanding the character of the spirit of the still, and the wood policy for developing the wood policy for the 3 distilleries. So everything from, nosing the cask, nosing the spirit 3-4 times a week from the different distilleries, to selecting the oak, deciding on the proportion of bourbon cask, sherry casks, the wood policy, what we buy every year. And then right through to looking at the inventory management as well. So in terms of the portfolio of inventory that we have maturing in our warehouses, hundreds of thousands of casks, right. When we're going to release those, and which products they will end up going into. So be it BenRiach 10-year-old or 21-year-old or indeed older, and the same right. with the other 2 distilleries. So a combination of decision making, again in collaboration with quite a number of people, for example, BenRiach, how much of our standard spirit we distill, that's classic, unpeated, how much of our peated we distill per year, how much triple distilled, and when we do these activities as well during the course of the year. Okay. And then, of course, I get to know thousands of casks per year, deciding which ones are ready to be bottled, and approving the whiskies for bottlings as well. Okay. I'm not alone. I've got quite a great team. We work in collaboration to really to bring these whiskies to life.
Right, brilliant. So you mentioned several hundreds. You said a few hundred thousands. I mean, approximately how many casks are you responsible, at any one time for? How many would be in the warehouses across those distilleries?
Yeah, I mean, it does vary, but depending on our inventory. But, typical number of casks, say, at GlenDronach. Now, these are all really big casks. So these are round about, 2.5 times the size of a standard barrel, so around about 500 litres. And, we would have 35,000 on site, and then similar at our other distilleries as well.
Okay.
So
okay.
well over 100,000 actually at our own distilleries.
Okay. And then in terms of, I mean, so when you assumed the role, how do you go about, because you had worked before that with Morris and Bowmore, and so very different distilleries. I say different, but I just mean in terms of the stock holding. How do you then acquaint yourself with the several 100,000 casks that are now, in your charge?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's about getting to know the cat. It's like getting to know a new friend, really. It's great to have the opportunity to discover a new malt, to explore different malts throughout Scotland. And I've been very, very lucky to go from the Northern Highlands to Islay, to the Lowlands, up into the Northeast, and then Speyside, and really cover all these areas. So for me, it's about understanding the character in each area. It's understanding the ingredients, the influence of terroir, the atmosphere, the maturing stocks, and then bringing the character and essence of that distillery to life, in its authentic character. So for example, GlenDronach. I was born just a few miles from GlenDronach. My parents are still there, and the character, the richness, the depth, the soul, the strength of character is so intense that sherry cask maturation is really, for me, paramount, and that's where we obviously put huge investment into delivering this real malt of substance and character. And yeah, it's not that hard. I think if you've got an open mind and a good sense of understanding aroma, character, process, terroir, I suppose very similar to enology and wine. You could also apply that to the different characters of the different regions in Scotland, and indeed throughout the world. It's amazing how much geography has a part to play in character. So yeah, it's not that hard. It's just having an open mind and being explorative.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, because the idea of terroir in whiskey is quite a hot debate, so to speak. There are individuals such as yourself that very much kind of believe in this idea. And there's a few distilleries that very much champion that, and then there's many distilleries that just say, well, it doesn't matter. Obviously, our water is important, our barley is important, but the idea of terroir is not actually in our whiskey. So I think we can leave that debate for another day. But it's nice to know kind of your thoughts.
Everything makes a difference. I think that's it's like a person. Everything, who you are today is a culmination of everything. Everything in that journey. So.
And whiskey, same thing.
Same thing. Right. It's character. It's what it's been in contact with. How the atmosphere, the aroma, the temperature, humidity. Fine weather, cold weather, whatever. How it's been impacted and grown.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, in terms of the signature character for the three distilleries, I mean, how you're responsible for these? What is the official line in terms of the three distilleries, and what is the kind of the distillery DNA that drinkers should find in those different releases?
Okay, well, if we start with the one that's closest to my heart, where I was born, GlenDronach, the distillery character is not typical, it's very unique. It's Eastern Highlands, which is robust, lots and lots of body, full flavoured, and also fruity, because obviously GlenDronach means Valley of the Brambles. And again, that idea of terroir, there are bramble bushes growing in that valley, in the Valley of Forg. And somehow, mysteriously, we only have 3 ingredients, malted barley, wash and yeast, but somehow that character comes into the whiskey, and that is part of its DNA. So dark fruit, a little bit winey even off the stills. They're almost like cognac-shaped stills, or saxophone-shaped stills, as I call it. The wooden washbacks, the old cast iron mash tun, and everything goes into creating this duality of character, with depth down in that Valley of Forg, and also these very exquisite top notes of the fruits. And it's having that duality that goes particularly well with a sherry cask. Intense sherry cask maturation, full-bodied, robust, yet elegant, and also fruity. If you go to Speyside, obviously Speyside is has more, actually it's more like this, more days sunshine than the rest of Scotland. I think I read 40 days more sunshine in Scotland than the rest of Scotland. It's actually quite dry and quite temperate in it doesn't get quite as cold as in the Cairngorms, and not quite as obviously as humid as by the coast. So that has an influence. And then BenRiach itself has a real orchard fruit character. So everything in the process, from the 4-water mash to the distillation and the beautiful pear-shaped stills, to maturation primarily in ex-bourbon cask, but also virgin oak, sherry, and about 20 or 30 other different types of cask, mostly eclectic cask collection in Speyside. It brings out this really succulent, beautiful balance between fruit, malt, and oak. And of course, it also has added layers of smoke because we also peat at BenRiach. Right. So it's beautifully balanced, and perfect for a day like today, just like in the heart of Speyside. And then we've got Glenglassaugh, which of course is on the coast, up near Portsoy, right in the beach in Sandown Bay. It's tucked into the bay, but it is exposed to the conditions of the North Sea. So it's very elemental. The clouds are always moving. You get 4 seasons in 1 hour, no matter one day, and it has this lush coastal character that's really quite unlike any other distillery. I mean, we've got 133 distilleries in Scotland now, and there's no other distillery like it. It's almost like tropical fruit and butterscotch straight off the still, and it's incredible, especially when you pair it with food. So that is the combination of everything in its creation, fermentation, wooden washbats, open to the sea, sea air, and you get a lot of this again, the influence of terroir that seems to really have this almost lactic fermentation, lambic fermentation, that gives you that real tropical and luscious flavour. So these are the characters you then want to bring out when you mature, depending on the wood policy that the business thinks is best, based on the character.
I think there's a good question there, because each of those 3 distilleries, unique in their own right in terms of the distillery character. All 3 distilleries are doing at least some portion peated malt, which is quite unusual. That you've got 3 distilleries in the portfolio that generally maybe are producing unpeated malt, but then there is a portion that is attributed to peated smoky whiskey. And is it possible to keep a distillery's character through both a peated and unpeated releases, as well as then all that cask experimentation?
Absolutely. I mean, I've worked with a lot of peated distilleries. Obviously, I led distilleries, quite a few of those, and then also peated malts in the northeast of Scotland. And every distillery is very different. So, for example, if you go back in time to the very traditional peated character of GlenDronach, it was actually quite a low level. It was using mostly the coal and anthracite, a little bit of the more earthy peat. So you would, it's almost the smell. We don't have much peated, very small level of peated in GlenDronach stock profile, but it has that. It's almost like old coal bunkers and being beside, elm sleepers on a railway track. It's got that kind of old smoky feel to it, whereas BenRiach, for example, the smoke is very, very sweet. It's like smoked apple wood, so that beautiful orchard fruit has been smoked and it's been caramelized. It's sweet, it's got maple syrup in there, lashings of sweetness. So it's more like you're again, great for a day like today. It's more like you're having a barbecue with sweet smoke, and that character comes through from the distillation, from every element of the spirit creation. And then with Glenglassaugh being by the coast, and also the influence of the sea air, the microflora during fermentation, when you've got the peat in there, it really is amplifying some of the more the tropical, the waxy, the lipid character, the very what would the word be? It tastes quite very succulent peat. Obviously we have Glenglassaugh Torfa, which is the peated expression that has that really succulent peat, the coastal luscious character, and then BenRiach with that more campfire smoke, or having a barbecue in a forest, which not unsimilar to where I am today. So one for later.
All right.
So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. It does. In terms of the stock holding, so I mean, you have 3 distilleries. They each have different technical histories of producing whiskey or not. I mean, how difficult is it to manage, a brand that now is trying to be established or re-established when your stocks are quite checkered? I think of Glenglassaugh. I mean, there's such a period of non-production. How do you go about building a brand? When you don't have a 20-year-old you can bottle, obviously you will in several years' time, but I mean, there must be some great challenges involved there.
Yeah, it's a real paradox. That's probably the word. A bit like Glenglassaugh itself is a bit of a paradox, I think. In many different ways. It's really not like anything else. And it's interesting, and you have to be patient, most importantly. But the real benefit of Glenglassaugh, I think, is that it's so developed in the flavours of the still that with the non-aged expressions, the evolution, the revival, and the torfa, they've got such richness and succulence of flavour that the maturity is almost seems to be there already. Because of longer fermentations and the depth of flavour that's very succulent on the palate. There's no dryness there. It's very succulent, sweet, coastal, everything you look for in a really great coastal malt. So I think when it's non-aged, it's fabulous. And then obviously with time, I mean, it's no surprise to those who love the distillery that those who know that it started up, it reawakened at the end of 2008. So yeah, we're kind of, there wasn't much stock there though, so it definitely wouldn't have been sustainable as an ongoing 10-year-old, say, at that stage. So I would say watch this space, because as you might imagine, the stock is starting to mature. That it's not been used for the non-aged. And then we also obviously have the stock pre-1986, before the distillery was mothballed, but very, very little of this. But it does go back to 1963. So yeah, so watch this space. And we're very lucky to have this portfolio, to have the stock that is so very old, and yet so succulent and full flavored, and everything that is the holy grail of malt. Some people think these top notes of tropical fruit, and also the body and the really lush character. So yeah, we do have a gap, and we just have to be patient, and obviously do a lot of sampling and decide what the portfolio is going to look like in future. Right. So yeah, that's the next phase.
Yeah, and we look forward to that. I mean, I'm a big fan of Glenglassaugh. I was fortunate enough to visit the distillery a few years ago. I've been fortunate enough to try a few of the older expressions. I'm a big fan of the younger releases are now available. But yeah,
do you have a favorite, Mark? I shouldn't have asked that. I hate it when people ask me that.
I'll just, for sake of being diplomatic, I like them all equally.
You love them all, yeah. That's what I say, especially with 3 samples. It's like, I can't choose. It's like choosing which child I love most. I might love that one most today, that one most tomorrow, that one most the next day.
Exactly. And I think, I mean, with Glenglassaugh, and the reason I ask is because, there is some very old Glenglassaugh available. It's, as you say, it's almost that paradox of, there's 30-year-olds, there's 25, there's 35s, there's that I think I tried, it goes up and up and up. And then there's the no age statement, younger stuff. Now, younger isn't bad, but obviously they offer a very different, experience to the whiskey drinker. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to fill in that gap as the distillery now matures.
Yeah, I've got a glass of the Revival here. Oh, nothing like it. Outdoors with a glass of Revival, it's just so rich, and you can smell the sea air, the wonderful overripe fruits. You know, it's like when you go to the distillery in the summer and they've got the best ice cream shop in the world that has the best dairy ice cream with mango and raspberries and really overripe fruit. And, you know, Glenglassaugh is like that. It's really developed. It's almost overripe in a really, really, really good way.
Right.
Which is why it's great, you know, for summertime by the beach, with an ice cream, with some syrup on top, some raspberry syrup. Oh, I mean, that's, for me, that's revival. It's, you know, it's just oozing in succulence. Beautiful, beautiful dram.
Unfortunately, I don't have a bottle of Revival with me on hand. I am, as I mentioned, drinking the BenRiach peated rum cask. Thank you very much for your role in bottling these for Whiskey Brother.
Thank you very much for selling it and for enabling people around the world to try peated rum cask, which, you know, really is something else. I absolutely love the combination because rum casks are so, again, they've got that wonderful syrupiness, a rum cask, and then you have the peat and that barbecue smoke together. It's really surprisingly wonderful combination.
When it comes to BenRiach, so, you know, I'm a big fan of all three distilleries. What I find fascinating about BenRiach in particular, though, is that, you know, the spirit seems to work in so many different guises. You know, whether it's peated or unpeated, or whether it is rum or sherry or Madeira or just ex-bourbon barrel, the spirit just seems to shine through. I mean, you know, what is it about the production process that creates such a spirit that seems to be so versatile?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about balance. I mean, it's not, you know, it's everything. It's every aspect from the barley, the 4-water mash, which is unusual because normally when you extract the sugars from the milled malted barley, it's just mashed 3 times, and it's a bigger step up in temperature each time. Whereas with the 4-water mash, it's a more general, gradual kind of increase in temperature each time. So I think that, you know, does unlock more of the sugars, but also more of the sweetness and the flavour potential as well from the malt, and to give you a broader spectrum of flavour. And then especially when it's distilled, and these beautiful, I can just describe them as pear-shaped stills. They're quite different from the broader onion-shaped stills that you get in Speyside. They're quite a narrow base, so they are like a pear, like a Williams pear, and quite tall. And because of the short 4 shots, only 13 minutes, and then we go quite deep into the faints as well, you get this rainbow of flavour, like, you know, a whole range of fruits, very fruit forward, from oranges and lemons to apples and pears, you know, right through to the creaminess of the malt in the middle and the honey, and then into a little bit of spice at the end. And then, of course, that can be brought out in different types of casks. So bourbon cask very much bring out the vanilla and the fruit. A sherry cask bring out the spice and the honey and that caramelized sweetness. And then the virgin oak, again, more of that spice as well. So yeah, it's got this beautiful balance of fruit, malt and oak, and then obviously when there's the peat, there's added layers of smoke. So I think that's what makes it really, really special in Speyside, because some other Speysides are, you know, fruity but perhaps less malty, and some are more perhaps malty but less fruity. So, you know, even where it is in Speyside, halfway between the sea and the mountains, you know, it just gives you that beautiful balance. And of course, we've got very mineral rich water as well from the underground lake, the aquifer, the Murray aquifer, beneath the distillery, that is quite unusual in Speyside, because most Speysides use soft river water. So that minerality has an impact too. So yeah, there's no other distillery like it. But then, you know, all distilleries are different. But, you know, yeah, BenRiach is a beautiful balance.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So it's, I mean, a question around that minerality of the water. You know, I think there's also different opinions on this, but in kind of in your, you know, this is what you do. How does that actual resulting flavor? Because, so am I correct in the understanding that it's around the impact it has during fermentation and actual early stages of producing the alcohol and the flavors in that in the wash?
Yeah, I mean, it really, it helps the yeast as well. Obviously, it will have an element of interaction with the barley itself. And obviously malt barley does have minerals in it, as well as lipids and nitrogenous components and sugars and lots of different things. But you've got these additional minerals, which are a bit like vitamins for us, minerals for the yeast. And these minerals are really, really good. It's the particular biochemical pathway for the yeast to create the esters, in particular the kind of what we call the acetate esters, which are the real orchard fruit esters that give you the pear and then the apple and whatnot. So yeah, okay. So I think it helps to bring out the particular spectrum of esters that we see.
Okay, thank you for that. In terms of BenRiach, and I think to some degree, but less so, Glenglassaugh and GlenDronach, they're definitely in the last several years, they seem to be distilleries that are doing a lot of experimentation. Peated, unpeated, triple distill, various cast finishes. Is that something that will be part of the brands going forward, or is that just kind of in this exploratory phase because there's new people involved, new master distiller, new owners?
Well, I think there has been a lot of experimentation done. Obviously, I've done a lot of experimentation in the past 28 years, and with the distilleries themselves, a lot was done by my predecessor. So I'm very fortunate to be able to reap the rewards of that experimentation, and also to be able to really very deeply look into the nature of each distillery and understand it much better with each individual experiment that has already happened. So I can look into it and go, oh yeah, that really, really worked. Yeah, and if we combine that and what percentage, and right, okay, and that is the amplification. What's going to really make that distillery shine? That's the most authentic character I can imagine from each distillery. So I suppose, yeah, there will be experimentation and exploration, especially with BenRiach. It's part of its DNA. Exploring flavor. It's got that balance. You can, dial up and down and play tunes and have a bit of fun and be creative and curious. But at the same time, there is a sense of this is what that distillery is all about, and really the next phase is learning from all that experimentation and really amplifying the character of the distillery with what's worked and what tells its story best.
Okay. Is there anything that you've laid down from one of the three distilleries that's kind of maturing away that you're very excited about and that we haven't seen on the market just yet?
Oh yes. I mean, obviously, certainly, in terms of wood in particular, we have a world of wood. Very lucky with our owner, Brown-Forman, because they have such incredible expertise and knowledge and source of really high quality American oak that had different seasonings, different heat treatments, and obviously different experiments as well with the bourbon and with Jack Daniels. So Jack Daniels Woodford Reserve, Oak Forester, for example. So there are, there's an opportunity there to obviously experiment with these different casks. Whether it's the innovations in bourbon, so if it's different mash bills and malt or rye or whatever, and then the different casks that the distilleries, the master distiller, Chris Morris, for example, at Woodford Reserve, how he has really decided on which casks, how they're treated for that particular bourbon or rye, and then obviously we can then source these casks, as well as getting the benefit of the virgin oak itself from the forests in the Appalachian Mountains, from Missouri to the prairies and whatever. So that's the kind of influence of the American side, which is wonderful for BenRiach. BenRiach, harmonizes beautifully with American oak in particular. And then, of course, we can keep exploring. So what do you have in your glass, Mark? Are you having your peated rum?
I'm still on the peated rum, but I'm about to pour myself some this. The 21
Authenticus, wonderful. So
yeah,
that's peated, obviously. We have wonderful peated old stocks.
My cork just broke.
Oh.
So I won't be pouring this right now. We were quite lucky because of the South African connection. We had as a market we got some really good, interesting BenRiachs at good market prices. Like the 21 Authenticus, like some of the solstices, which is the peated and port. So it's been great as a retailer. We've over the last 7 years we've had all these wonderful BenRiach expressions. We've had the GlenDronach, we had the 16 Platinum, which is not generally available in other markets. So we were quite fortunate. We hope that continues, and the 2 new single casks we just got from you guys, magnificent. We have something else coming from you soon, which I haven't disclosed to our viewers out there. But we hope it continues. I mean, there's definitely, and I can see from the comments, there's a great kind of enthusiast base for BenRiach, GlenDronach, and to Glenglassaugh as well. So we'll try and continue that. Can we expect you in South Africa anytime soon to give us a visit and do some whiskey?
Once we all get out of lockdown.
Yeah.
Whenever that might be. Yeah. But yeah, I'd love to come and visit. I'd love to come to South Africa. I've never been, so it's definitely on my list. And hopefully, when all this passes and everyone is able to travel again, I'd love to. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Hopefully, we'll see you soon. You can take that as an open invitation. Just let us know, and we can help arrange it. Rachel, I mean, so you started your kind of whiskey career with the Scotch Whisky Research Institute. I'd love you just to kind of, maybe give them a punt or two, because I think it's a very important organization that most whiskey drinkers don't even know exists, and yet it plays quite an important role in the Scotch industry. I mean, what are they about? Why should people know what they do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great organization. It's been around since, can't remember exactly, in 1970s it was started up when it was Pentland's Scotch Whisky Research Institute back in the day. I worked there from 91, 92 right through to 95, and it was in an old listed building with big turrets, and there was a mass spectrometer right down in the dungeon, and lots of equipment, lots of analytical equipment. There's about maybe 25 to 30 people work for the organization. So I was very, very lucky back in the day to get a job as a research scientist there. I was employed by Dr. Jim Swan, the late great Dr. Jim Swan, who was really my mentor and is probably my biggest influence as well. But it's a very, very important organisation because it's where everyone in the Scotch whisky industry collaborates. So it's where I get to meet all the other master blenders and distillers and distillery managers and people, from throughout the supply chain really as well, from malt right through to bottling. And, we share our collaborative learning and research, and, quite often that's anonymized, but it is an opportunity, and really the power is in that collaboration, to understand flavor, to understand the sustainability of the industry, the environmental aspects, the influence of wood, of barley, looking at different barley varieties, etc., etc. So, it's a fascinating organisation. I was very lucky to work in the maturation and blending department under Dr. Jim Swan, and we looked at flavour. So everything from changing the original gravities in the mash and seeing what impact that had on the fruit creation, the mineral content of the water, looked at that, what influence did that have, distillery, looking in very small scale, distillery cut points, the influence of different levels of copper content. I mean, there was just so much. And then even down in the dungeon, you know, getting wood from around the world from back then. I mean, that was, gosh, 28 years ago. Getting wood from, you know, even Hungary, from Japan, from the US, different parts, from Spain, all over. And then literally band sawing it and extracting it and running it through mass spectrometer and identifying what the flavour potential is before it then creates casks. So I was very, very lucky. And then, you know, looking at warehousing as well. So, you know, I had one project looking at 10,000 casks at that stage in different warehouses. So that was just groundbreaking stuff, looking at the influence of warehouse environment, temperature and humidity, and first fill versus second fill, etc. So all that work was done, you know, 28 years ago.
Wow.
And it continues to this day.
That must have set you up very well for kind of entering the production side of the whiskey industry, having that great insight into all these specific variables and details.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it was absolutely fascinating. I mean, it hadn't been done before. There was very little work had been done on wood maturation. Certainly none really in whiskey prior to that, or very, very little, maybe a little bit in the 80s and sherry wood. And then looking at American oak and you know, ear seasoning, etc., kiln drying in the early 90s. But yeah, it was very, very insightful, and especially the part that really I think inspired me was, you know, Dr. Jim Swan. You know, I described him as the Albert Einstein of whiskey, because he looked deep into the nature of everything, and he you know, the people, the consumer, as well as the technicalities, sensory, psychology, everything. And he looked deep into that, and then he just understood everything better. So he got to the point, you know, that's experience, I suppose, where you just know, the nose knows, you know, what you know, the whiskey almost tells you where it wants to go, because you've got all this kind of understanding.
Yeah, it's brilliant. So, I mean, for anyone watching who maybe is not that familiar with Dr. Jim Swan, I mean, just to say that sadly he passed away a few years ago. He was an absolute legend in the industry. Like, as you said, he worked for the SWRI, the Research Institute, for many years. Later on, he became a consultant to the whiskey industry at large globally, and very much single-handedly helped individuals set up new distilleries across the world. So, you know, if I'm not mistaken, you know, from Cavalan, from Taiwan to Israel, to dozens of the new distilleries coming online these days in Scotland, Dr. Jim was behind many of those.
Absolutely.
As you say, you know, just the nose knows, and incredibly, you know, just brilliant when it came to whiskey, but also, you know, a really good, you know, human being and kind, caring person. So a real loss to the industry when he passed away a few years ago. And if you look at some certain releases from newer distilleries, you'll see his signature on the bottle. The best example, I think, is Kilchoman. The first few years of Kilchoman releases all have Dr. Jim's signature on the bottle, because he was involved with Anthony Wills and the Wills family helping set up Kilchoman back in 2005. So you may not know the name, but you've undoubtedly tried some of his whiskey. Or drunk something that he was very much, you know, critical in bringing to market or creating. So,
yeah, I mean, he is such an influence, that, you know, on the research of Scotch, and, you know, making it the very, you know, finest character it can be. You know, of course, I'm biased, but, you know, I think Scotch whisky is the most complex spirit in the world, and was one of the is you know, the finest, and you know, the quality standards we have are just so high at every step of the way, from the malt right through to the oak, to the maturation environment, and obviously my job, which, you know, during that whole process, is understanding it all and deciding, you know, when to bottle, and leaving whiskey behind as well, being patient, you know, is leaving, you know, being able to leave cask behind until they're 25, 30, 45, 50 years old. You know, there's not many spirits in the world can do that.
Absolutely. Rachel, just a few more questions, and then if you still have the time and you don't mind. As a master blender, I think your most valuable tool is your nose. I mean, it's all about being able to discern the different nuances and aroma. For someone who is struggling with that, or someone that's new to whiskey, what recommendations, what advice would you give someone to improve their ability to pick up a glass and list several descriptors and discern the flavor?
Yeah, I mean, you can never nose enough whiskey, right? I want to get that point. I can never nose enough whiskey, because you learn something new every day, and it tells you a different story every day. So today I'm in my garden. I'm nosing BenRiach 10-year-old because I think it's just beautiful for just everything, the beautiful lushness of spring, and change the environment you're in. Go inside, go in your kitchen, come outside, take your time, stop and smell the roses, stop and smell the whiskey, become a little bit mindful, just sit back and discover the aromas. So whatever you do, it is really just heightening your senses, whether all your senses, whether it's tuning your ear into the birds that are singing right now, or listening to music, playing a musical instrument or whatnot. You really are tuning into the individual notes when you are appreciating music, and obviously you can do that in whiskey as well, by taking your time, becoming mindful, basically breathing in,
practicing,
being relaxed as well. I think it's a big part. I hate nosing. If I'm stressed, I can't nose. I've got to be, well, actually, as soon as I nose whiskey, I relax. So it's kind of, if I'm doing something at work that's, it's challenging, a bit of number crunching and whatnot, I'm like, I've got to go nose now. And then everything is good. But yeah, I think it's just being aware. So in your garden, it could be nosing, honey. It could be nosing, obviously floral notes, spices, herbs in the garden. I've got some sage and thyme over there. Or when you're cooking as well. And obviously, for people who have travelled, or indeed, now you can have many different foods without having to travel as well. The appreciation of the different flavors in the world, I think is, again, being a bit of an Epicurean as you enjoy different foods, and then sense them in the whiskey. So for example, GlenDronach 12-year-old, when I nose a GlenDronach 12-year-old, I'm straight in Jerez. I have been there, but even without going there, if I have in my kitchen, I've got Oki Blanca olives, I've got Jamon Serrano, I've got sherries. They just add to the appreciation. Some walnuts, mixed nuts, and raisins, dried fruit, all the things that you do enjoy eating at the end of the day. They help you. So I would say, GlenDronach 12, perfect. Just get yourself a bag of fruit and nut, some, cranberries and raisins and hazelnuts and walnuts and whatnot, almonds, and then enjoy it with the whiskey. And you'll be amazed. You're like, look, it's in the whiskey. How did that happen? And you're also having fun at the same time, and you're enjoying yourself.
Right.
And with Glenglassaugh, I'm straight to the ice cream. I'm like, oh God. When I first nosed Glenglassaugh, I'm right straight to that butterscotch, tropical fruit, syrupy, unctuous, luscious. And especially like just now, you just want to get your freezer, get some ice cream out, get some mangoes on there, some mango and tropical fruit and some syrup. And you're like, wow, it's in the whiskey. It really is, when you actually start initially doing the comparison where they are synergistic, and then you can obviously contrast as well. That's quite a good thing to do. It's like when you put coffee on the back of your hand, if you want to really pick out the fruit, or you've got a peated whiskey there, Mark, if you sniff your peated whiskey and you get that camphor smoke, and then you go to an unpeated, the fruit is just going to leap out of the glass, and the one that's not peated. So you can, doing that comparing, contrasting, recalibrating, going from one profile to the next. In comparison, you're sitting with 2 or 3 glasses and of different styles, and then discovering, because they're bigger differences, you can then train yourself better.
I often say, obviously Whiskey Brother, we conduct hundreds of tastings each year, and I it's very hard to just smell one whiskey and then say, how sweet or how spicy or how smoky it is without having something you can compare it to. It's like saying, how fast is a car? Well, compared to which other car? And there's such a range of flavors. You need those comparisons.
Yeah, you really have to try them all. or you have to, it's amazing. It's like food, isn't it? It's really the same. People say, what's your favorite food? Well, if it's like this, so maybe get the Barbie out. I love smoky, steaks and whatnot. Right. And then if it's a colder day, it might be, some broth, some good vegetables and cooked, and then another day it'll be something sweet. And then, of course, in a meal you have, savoury and sweet anyway. So right. It's no different. You can, just go from one to the next, and you get these, you really appreciate everything so much more, I think, when you can compare and contrast. Right. Like everything in life, variety is the spice of life, is it not?
Absolutely. And I encourage, like you've also just said, but it's like constant practicing and experimenting. So just even if you're not drinking, if you're cooking, smell everything before you use it in the pot or in the pan, because a lot of the whiskey flavor, I guess, descriptors can be they don't have to be overly complicated or esoteric. Ginger, cinnamon, demerara sugar. These are things that you probably
are we still on?
Are you there, Rachel? Oh, I think we have lost Rachel. I'd love to know if people can still see me and hear me. If you can, maybe just drop me a comment in the chat. Rachel seems to. Oh, are you back, Rachel? You're back.
I'm back. Yes. Right. So it's great fun, isn't it? Nosing and tasting whiskey, and it's definitely something to do in these times when we're in lockdown inside. Hopefully we've got some stock at home, and you can just spend time getting to know whiskey, let it tell you its story, and tell more about yourself as well at the same time.
I'd like to move on, just before I move on to a few of the audience questions. Something that I think is really important is around kind of the topic of inclusivity in the industry. So, I mean, as a female, you've blazed a trail, you've broken many a glass ceiling. You're one of the very few female master blenders. In terms of an industry, what do you think we're doing right, and what do you think we could do better in terms of being more inclusive to all sorts of folk?
Yeah, I think actually it's a great industry to be in. I think the Scotch whisky industry is just very, very open. It's very transparent. It's very it's very inclusive. We have we are open to the world, basically. We have the industry has employed women way back. This is nothing new. Yeah. It's perhaps new having the diversity of different roles. Maybe it's a little bit more diverse in different individual teams, or in different departments, or indeed across the world, as well. And I really, I think technology really helps as well. Like we're talking today. It's just in the past few weeks. It's incredible how we've all just been the same. We're all in it together. We're all making whiskey together. There's no biases. We're just all passionate people who love what we do, and I think that shines through. I think it's a great industry. It's a great industry to be in.
I mean, you're traveling. You travel quite extensively. I know several weeks a year you're on the road. Hopefully, we'll see you in South Africa soon. But are you seeing different trends in different markets?
Sorry, I missed that last part, Mark.
It seems to be whenever I ask a question, the birds get more excited. But what trends are you seeing in the different markets that you're traveling to in terms of what the drinkers look like these days?
Yeah, I missed that part. The drink, just the very last sentence.
The diversity of whiskey drinkers in the different markets.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Gosh, it's really changed, hasn't it? It's really opened up. The doors have opened to wherever you go. I mean, from everywhere from Seoul in South Korea. I mean, I really hadn't expected there to be kind of 22-year-old women into single malt. I don't know why, but I just hadn't expected it, and was quite pleasantly surprised. Taiwan's the same. US as well. They really are. It's really opening up and becoming more diverse. Yeah, everywhere. Yeah, Europe too. I think Asia is probably greatest diversity, and the US, I think, in terms of more and more women getting into it. But yeah, Europe also. So yeah, what can I say? It just is the doors are open. It's incredibly diverse. There are no barriers.
That's wonderful to hear. If you're happy, I'll move on to just 2 or 3 of the audience questions, and then I'll let you get on with your afternoon. We have a question from Vernon saying, how has the US taxes affected your exports to the US? He's asking that maybe in a roundabout way, will we see some new 75 CL bottles headed to South Africa that would have been initially for the US market?
Oh, I don't know. I can't answer that one. You stumped me there. I mean, I think our malts are all doing very well. People are continuing to enjoy malt even at the moment. Sadly, what's happening at the moment, but people do seem to be enjoying it. Our whiskies are growing.
Right. Has there been any impact to the volume consumed in America based on the tax war, the trade war?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen any impact on the growth of our single malts. Our single malts are continuing to grow.
Okay.
I mean, they have started from quite a small base, and we've had such great accolades. We've won best whiskey in the world, for example, in the States at the San Francisco World Spirits Awards. So the GlenDronach 15-year-old revival actually won the best not just single malt Scotch, but the best whiskey in the world. So I think when people appreciate quality and hear how great single malt is, they do. You don't need much. It's consaver, and it's growing.
Okay, brilliant. Next question, someone from Hardy is saying GlenDronach peated is brilliant. When are we likely to see some more? So I guess the question there is, how much peated whiskey is GlenDronach producing? And is it a core expression or just a limited release every so often?
Yeah, I mean, we do have some peated stock, not a lot, but some. And we do have an expression which has been released in UK, Europe. I'm not sure where else. I think the US still has to get it. I'm not sure about South Africa. It's not that widespread. It's just really just starting to be sold, and it is called the traditionally peated. So it's a little different from the original peated expression in that it has more of the authentic level of peat that would have been the case at GlenDronach in many years gone by, where it was that typical GlenDronach kind of more kind of smoky, earthy, a little bit of those kind of elm sleepers by a railway kind of smokiness, smouldering smoke, and so there is some, and that expression is being produced. I'm just not sure exactly where it has reached because it's fairly recent.
Okay. All right. But so it's something that, in time will continue to be available, obviously market dependent.
Yeah, I would hope so. Hope it will be available going forwards, because we do have some stock, so it should be more readily available going forwards. I mean, it's not, it's quite different from our core, so people expect it's different, but it's still quite that authentic, quite a different character from peated malt. So yeah, it should be.
Okay, thank you so much. There seems to be lots of interest in it from our viewers. We have had some in South Africa, but not on a consistent basis. But I guess we'll hope and we'll see what we can do to get some more. There's a question that actually keeps popping up quite regularly, and I'm sure it's not the first time you've heard it. This is from Duncan, and he says, "What was the rationale for the change in the GlenDronach 15-year-old revival from being just Oloroso to now a mix of Oloroso and PX?"
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when I go back and I kind of taste the older expression and I compare it to like the 18-year-old, the 18-year-old is very, very distinctive. It's commanding, it's masterful, it has a very distinctive Oloroso character, very full-bodied. And then, the 12-year-old is that perfect balance between the brambly fruit, the creaminess of the malt, and the sherry cask, the Pedro Jimenez and Oloroso. At 15, literally I nosed hundreds and hundreds of casks, and very quickly the whiskey told me what it wanted to be. Sounds crazy, but the Pedro Jimenez cask at 15 years old has a clarity, a balance, a length, a depth. It's like how do I say it? Dates and dark chocolates and winter spices all woven in with the Oloroso, just that sumptuous mid palate. So it had a length of finish that was truly, truly exceptional, and in my view, made the range of 12 to 15 to 18 really quite distinctive, with the different facets of GlenDronach. So GlenDronach can be, as I maybe have said, sorry about that, is full-bodied, robust, fruity, and it has these the elegance, the spiciness, the top notes. And I think the 15-year-old, it's like a swathe of silk velvet. This is the one which you want to go back, you don't want to be in 2020. I would want to be in 1920. With the time of La Belle Epoque and beautiful silk gown and grand piano and dinner jackets, and it has that kind of exquisite gravitas to it that and it's won best whiskey in the world, so it got even higher points at the International Wine and Spirits competition this year than the original 4 years ago.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for that. A very good question here by Rainer, who says, when blending single malt expressions, what happens to barrels that don't have a suitable flavor profile? Do these make out a significant proportion? So I suppose when it comes to vatting or blending a new single malt release, some casks are not going to be ready yet, right? For whatever reason, even if they are of suitable age. So, I think the gentleman is asking, what happens to those casks? Do they just get kind of reconsidered next year, or what would your approach be?
Yeah, they're just going to take a bit longer at school, aren't they? They're just going to take a bit more of a conversation with the cask, learn a bit more about the cask. And, I think it's a combination of leaving it longer. And then obviously I sample right from the spirit of the still, typically with the sherry cask 6 months later. See how that delivery of that container, what has that intensity been like, and then another 2 years, and then so forth, closer to 12 years old. And if it's still not quite developing as it needs to be, I might take it out of school and put it into another school.
Okay.
to put it into another cask, re-rack it, or maybe change the position in the warehouse or whatnot, and or just leave it. You can just tell that you can tell when you nose if a cask is going to be best for a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old or an 18-year-old, and you get a sense of how much of each you need, and how much you want to leave, depending on the character. So some of the I suppose the casks that take longer do develop into really beautiful whiskies. Maybe after 25 or 30 years they might need to go into another cask, but
Oh no.
that are quite different from a core. You might actually have these ones, and they might be intense, but a very specific character. An explosion of, I don't know, fruit cake and spice, say, and it might not fit a core, but it might actually be released as a cask bottling, and therefore the connoisseur gets a chance to maybe taste a cask that's maybe more robust than you would normally find, or more fruity than you would normally find, or whatever. So yeah, you just have to make that best judgment as you go on using your nose.
Wonderful, thank you. Are you still around for maybe one more question from the audience? Are you okay for one more question from the audience?
One more question. There's a dog barking, but yeah, okay, on you go.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned triple distillation. What is the hullabaloo about Ireland contesting that they were meant to be unique?
So what is the hullabaloo about which? Sorry?
About Ireland contesting that triple distillation is unique to them. I think that's the question.
Ireland. Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't hear you say Ireland. Oh, well, oh, I don't know. Well, I could say Jameson was a Scotsman.
Right.
So that's going back in time. And I mean, triple distillation happens across the world now. I think it's something that is experimented with. Obviously, you could quadruple distill. Do what you want. Who knows? I mean, who knows where it really started? I mean, if Jameson started it, Jameson was a Scotsman. So that's a bit of a cheeky answer, I know.
What do you think the impact on on BenRiach spirit character is when it comes to triple distillation?
Sorry, I missed that again. Sorry, gosh, it's all falling to bits here.
That's okay. That's part of the enjoyment.
Am I still on? Yeah, am I still on?
I've got you verbally. Okay. I don't have you on video.
Okay, I'm sorry. I need to hold this to my ear so I can hear.
Okay, no problem. The audience will just be forced to look at me for a minute or two while we wrap up. What is the impact of triple distillation on the BenRiach spirit?
Oh, beautiful question. Love it. Well, because BenRiach has this beautiful balance of fruit and malt off the still and double distillation, what happens with time and in triple distillation is it really captures those top notes, all the citrus, the vitality, the zing, the zest, the orange, the lemon. It just makes it even more stimulating on the nose. It just amplifies the fruit and the very, very zesty fruit. It really brings your senses alive when you dip your nose in. But perhaps you get slightly less of the cereal notes. So that would be the.
Oh. Rachel, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry, we missed that last sentence. If you could just repeat that.
Okay. Yeah, what I was saying is it's quite different from the double distilled because it concentrates up the fruit, the zest and the citrus, and then it perhaps has less of the cereal and spice. So it has more of a kind of a zing and a luscious zestiness on the palate.
Okay. Okay, right. Rachel, I think we've lost you again. Can you hear me? Rachel. Hi, Rachel. I think I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We're breaking up. I'm going to have to move, I think.
No, that's
my
fine.
Wi-Fi.
I think you have been more than generous with your time. So if it's okay, thank you so much. I think we'll let you get back to your household and your family.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I meant to say congratulations to you, Mark, for winning the Icon of Whiskey.
Thank
Best
you.
Best retailer in 2020. That is absolutely phenomenal.
I really appreciate that. Thank you, Rachel. Hopefully we can get you out to South Africa and you can come visit us at Whiskey Brother and see what we're about. But
importantly,
I really appreciate your time, and I could speak to you for hours. It's fascinating. You do an incredible job. Thank you for the fantastic whiskey you produce. On behalf of the South African whiskey lovers, we love you. We love BenRiach, Glenglassaugh, GlenDronach, and we look forward to seeing you in South Africa.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mark. And Sláinte mhath, everyone. Good health. Stay safe. Take care.
Thank you very much, Rachel.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye. Okay, that brings us to the close of our discussion with Dr. Rachel Barrie. I think that was absolutely brilliant. What a fascinating individual, just incredibly accomplished and knowledgeable when it comes to whiskey. And I know I said this last week, I suspect I will say this a lot, but I mean, I'm a whiskey lover first and foremost, and I could speak to these people for hours. There is just so much to learn from them. And it's a real pleasure being able to kind of just listen to them speak and have the opportunity to ask them questions. Thank you so much for the questions you've posted. I didn't get to them all with Rachel. I do apologize. Just cognizant of the time, and I don't want to keep everyone waiting. What I may just do is I saw kind of a bit of chat on within the channel around next week's guest. So I am quite happy to disclose next week's guest. Try and entice you to come back. I know the lockdown, South African lockdown, will start wrapping up. Well, I need to choose my words carefully here, but as of next Friday, things will start, opening up to some degree, and hopefully, they'll open up, at a rapid pace thereafter. So Whiskey Brother can also get its doors open again and get you whiskey in hand. But we will have an episode next Friday, same time, 4 p.m. South African time. And we have another great guest. We've been very fortunate that these wonderful individuals and whiskey people are willing and wanting to speak to us. Next week's guest, we have the master distiller from Brook Luddy Distillery. We have Adam Hannett joining us. Adam took over from Jim McEwen when Jim retired several years ago. Jim, obviously, an absolute legend in the industry, and Adam very quickly kind of gaining the same reputation. He is responsible for Brook Luddy and all its various guises, which includes Port Charlotte and Octomore. Octomore being the most peatiest, the most smoky whiskey produced. So very much looking forward to having Adam on. Same time next week, we'll have a little chat to him, just to understand what's happening at the distillery, understand what he's up to, and what he has planned. Because again, a distillery that is also very well known for kind of experimentation, pushing the boundaries, producing some wonderful, wonderfully peated and unpeated whiskey from Islay, and dating back to 1881. Very excited to have Adam on the show. I'm happy to do a few minutes of question and answers. So I know there are plenty of questions. So for those individuals who asked, definitely happy to stick around. I completely understand if other people want to, just get on with their Friday afternoon. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode and found it informative. There's so much to talk about. I mean, I think that's the beauty of whiskey. It's just there's always something to learn. But thank you very much for tuning in. It's great to kind of have everyone watching and have the opportunity to share a dram. So there's a few questions. I maybe just quickly rattle through some of them. Some of them are addressed to Rachel, so I apologize I didn't get the opportunity to ask a question. There's a question here from difference noticed in color and taste between the 2018 and earlier and the 2019 GlenDronach 18. A bit more of a geeky question, but I absolutely love it. I mean, for individuals who, are quite enthusiastic and take their whiskey quite seriously, we often see this, right? We have a standard, inverted commas, a standard 18 release that is available all the time, but you see little, batch variations. I would imagine that Rachel will have something similar to say. She would have been responsible for the 2018 release as well. So if there's a difference between the 2018 and the 2019 release, it was, I think, at the time, a matter of casks and what she felt worked in the vatting, better, which casks were ready. Again, because GlenDronach was closed between 1996 and 2002, right? The 20-year-old that's available now is very much from that period, but that period there was not whiskey being made. So you can imagine that, because of the gap in stocks, there comes a period where you're either your 20-year-old is actually a 23 or 24-year-old, and then it gets to a point where you now have stock available that's 20 again. And a lot of the distilleries in BenRiach and GlenDronach definitely are known to have done this. If you look at some of these, they're right here. The 12-year-old peated, if you speak to the guys that were at the time, putting those whiskies together, the whiskey was no longer 12 years old. It was actually 15 years old, but they still had labels. They still had the standard expression. And so they just took the 15-year-old, put it in a 12-year-old, which is legal. The minimum age is still 12. Minimum age may be older. It's okay. So I'd imagine that the difference in the GlenDronach 18 batches are very much around that. The one other thing I'd add is that, when it comes to smaller distillery, less stock available, and batch variation is usually encouraged and something that they celebrate. And I know, Kilhoman are a very good example of this. And it's the reason that, their Machir Bay and their 100% Isla, are always slightly different. Yes, the general DNA and cask composition is similar, but because it's a small batch and you only have 20, 30 casks going into that vatting, you'll get nuance from every release, a slight variation, as opposed to, let's say a really big single malt producer who their 12-year-old is actually a combination of thousands of casks. It's much easier to be more consistent, ironically, with more casks going into the recipe than fewer. So I think the GlenDronach will be part of that explanation. Another question from Daron. Well, a question from Daron. Thank you for watching, Daron. Around, he did a detailed vertical tasting of the Allardyce 2011, 2018, 2019. 2019 is massively different. I would just kind of say the same answer as the previous question, very much around the 18-year-old and the differences between the releases. The truth is, for some drinkers, that's not going to be a sufficient explanation. But, we know all casks are different. And, if you're a smaller distillery and you're doing a small batch, the truth is, the variation is just almost a certainty of the business. And usually it's celebrated, right? We like the difference. We like the nuance between years. And it's great to say, oh, well, the 2018 is better than the 2019. Whereas for most whiskey drinkers, and let's be honest, the whatever 18-year-old it is, the Glen whatever, is consistent and it's good drinking and we know it and we trust and we love it. And then there's other distilleries that have that nuance and you actually, you're happy to every year see it and say, oh, actually this one, in my opinion, is slightly better or not. There's a question around, Gary, good question around the floor maltings at BenRiach. I meant to ask, it was on my list, so I apologize. I know there was a question, Fortune as well, from WB raised the question. So BenRiach, they have floor maltings when they've used them, periodically throughout the last few years since the distillery was revived. I know that they have recently, as of last year, used them. So I did with a bit of reading, there was a mention that in 2019, BenRiach ran their floor maltings. So they're not using them consistently. They're not using them for all their malt. This is all for those who are unsure. It's all very much around the preparation of the barley, getting raw barley and malting the barley to be able to start the whiskey production process. Most distilleries, and we're talking 98% of distilleries across Scotland, actually just buy their barley ready to go. They buy their barley malted from industrial companies that malt their barley. There are a handful of distilleries, and I literally mean 5, 6, 7 at most, that actually prepare some of their own barley and malt it themselves. BenRiach have the facilities. They don't do it regularly, but they do it occasionally. So how occasionally that is, we don't know. I should have asked Rachel. I may get some clarification from her on that. But I know they used them as of last year. So at this point in time, it literally looks like maybe once every year or every 18 months they're using their floor malting facilities. I've been asked by Vernon about what's my birthday dram. Vernon, thank you very much for asking. And there was a lot of kind of birthday wishes. So thank you guys and ladies and gents. I really appreciate it. It's very cool to be able to, kind of share my birthday with everyone. I haven't made a final selection for my birthday dram yet. I do plan on drinking something very good. I am considering the Highland Park 40. I have an open bottle that I very rarely pour. I think it's a good occasion for that. I have a single cask Duncan Taylor Ardbeg 19-year-old. I'm considering adding that into the mix, and otherwise I don't know. So I will. I'll share them online. If you follow me on Instagram or Twitter, I'll post it up there for people to see. But what else am I going to do but drink some really good whiskies tonight? Question from Gary. Rachel, can you shed some light on the sudden price increase on the aged Glenglassaugh 70 stock? So Gary, sorry, Rachel's gone. I missed the opportunity to ask the question. I think, you could probably answer this. I know we often feel we have the answer, but we want the official line. The truth is, if you just look at the pricing of the aged stock, it's all gone up. When Glenglassaugh was revived in late 2008, when the Billy Walker and the gang got a hold of it in 2013, all they had was old stock, and at the time, they had enough of it, so supply was there. Demand was not as high as it is today, or prices. Obviously, that's changed now dramatically. The aged stocks will be dwindling. Price of aged stock has literally doubled in the last 5 years. Just look at any of the old Glenfiddichs, old Balvenis, old Glenfarclases, and I think unfortunately Glenglassaugh followed the same suit. The truth is, as a market, it doesn't make any sense for a distillery to kind of be missing out. And by what I mean is, if there are, if the average price of a single malt that's 30 years old is X, it doesn't make sense for another distillery to sell that at X divided by 2, whatever it may be. It doesn't. Yes, there's a band where it becomes too cheap and too expensive. There is still market for that. Case in point, Bowmore. Bowmore. Very much premiumized. The age variants are much more expensive than others. Glenfiddich to the same degree, Balvenie to the same degree. Not necessarily the 20 to 30-year-old, but anything above 30 for Balvenie or Glenfiddich is much more expensive. Big brand, internationally recognized, high demand, so they can get away with it, and very limited stock. So it's a careful balance. There's a point where it's just too cheap and it'll sell out too quickly. The Glenfarclas 40 is a great example of that, and the distilleries learn their lesson and only have so much. The price unfortunately goes up. Gary, I didn't tell you anything you don't know. Hopefully, someone else listening in that was of interest. I'm going to take one more question. I'm just looking at the question, so excuse me, not exactly. So we've got a question from Kevin Fraser. Kevin asking, what is terroir for someone with zero idea? Terroir is a French word. I think it means kind of it's a terrier, but it's around the landscape. It's around the ingredients of the whiskey. Very much used for wine production, and the sentiment there is that the seasons, the climate, the soil, the grape is all the terroir, and it will impact the wine. In terms of the whiskey world, it is something that is, I almost want to say, not fiercely debated, but debated. And the reason for that being, a lot of producers think, well, it's not actually important, where my water comes from, where my barley comes from. Others, Bruichladdich being a great example, and we can speak to Adam next week about this. Very important for them where their barley comes from, traceability to the farmers in the area, and the idea that the local surroundings very much influence how their whiskey tastes. So that's terroir, Kevin, in a nutshell. Hope that answers your question. Okay, I think I will call it a wrap. We've, as usual, gone over. It definitely is not the happy hour, but the happy hour-ish. I just want to thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Hope it was interesting. Hope it was enjoyable. We'll make these available on YouTube, so just find our YouTube channel and subscribe. Hope everyone has a wonderful Friday afternoon. Just look out for, I guess, communications from us, from Whiskey Brother, around starting to open up we really hope we can get the shop open and online sales through as soon as possible, hopefully in the next 2 weeks. As soon as we're allowed to and can safely do so, we will. I'd just like to thank everyone for tuning in. I mean, it's always so cool to see everyone's names. Andrew, Patrick, Duran, Amanda from Cape Town, you and David, hope you guys are well. Kyle, we've got Grant in the house, Jacques, I'm just going through names. We've got Keith from Durban. Keith, thank you. Nipun, Peter, Mr. Vanas, hope you're well, sir. Lee Engel, thanks again. Sebastian, Dean, thank you. Another Andrew, different Andrew, thank you. Hardy as well. Mike, Jenny, just everyone, thank you so much. Hope you're safe, hope you're well. And there's a tad of whiskey left in my glass. Slàinte mhath.